Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, Trevor?
What is going on? And today we're going to be talking all about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And if you want more of mine and Cameron's thoughts on this, you can also enjoy That Nerdy Site Show episode 128, where we did a full-on spoiler cast on this, a month and a half ago when it originally came out.
It's a weird thing to be doing it this soon, Trevor.
It is, yeah. This 45-day cycle in theaters is very bizarre and very odd, but it gave us something to do this week for that D Plus show. Before we get into it, a little bit of additional housekeeping. Next week's episode is going to be a behind the attraction episode. The episodes I've been doing basically anytime I go to Disneyland because I'm going to be in Disneyland for the 4th of July week. So stay tuned for that for next week. And then the following week after that should be the Miss Marvel wrap up episode. So we'll do kind of the full season, full 6 episodes of Miss Marvel then. And then we'll throw, I don't know necessarily what's coming after that. I have been watching Baymax, the little series of mini shorts that came on, which I think might serve as a fun little, something different from what we sometimes do. So maybe we'll throw that in here by the end of July. Who knows? But stay tuned for all those future episodes. So why did we pick Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Well, because it's the big new Marvel movie on Disney Plus. It came out last Wednesday, alongside the finale of Kenobi, as well as episode 4 of Miss Marvel. Or episode 3 of Miss Marvel last week. Episode 4 was this week. So I was like, hey, that's, a big bombastic one that we can do for that D Plus show. And we'll get that knocked out. I think I also originally put it on there because Frank was hoping to join us, because I don't think he'd seen it yet. And unfortunately, he was not able to make it. But, hopefully he has been able to enjoy this film on his own time. A little bit of the history lesson for you. This was originally released May 6th, 2022. Other releases of the time, we had Everything Everywhere All at Once, the other big multiverse movie from this year, came out March 25th. We had Morbius, It's Morbin Time, came out April 1st, and then also got re-released, because of memes, and did terribly. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out April 8th. Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore came out April 15th. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent came out April 22nd. Doctor Strange is there on May 6th. Downton Abbey, A New Era, May 20th. And then one of the last big releases prior to this was probably Top Gun Maverick that came out May 27th. And then you also have stuff like Lightyear and Jurassic World Dominion, but I didn't bother pulling them in here for this. Doctor Strange has a runtime of 2 hours and 6 minutes. And in the MCU timeline of things, we had Hawkeye came out at the end of 2021, as well as Spider-Man No Way Home, the end of 2021. And we had earlier this year, Moon Knight came out in between March and May. Then Doctor Strange came out right on the heels of Moon Knight there on May 6th. Miss Marvel, currently running, came out June 8th and will be running through July 13th. Thor: Love and Thunder up next on the big screen front, coming out July 8th. I know Cameron is very excited for that. We'll be seeing that one next week, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
She-Hulk is going to be coming out August 17th. And following Thor: Love and Thunder, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is the final Marvel film slated for the year. Veterans Day weekend, November 11th, 2022. Let's dive into the roll call. Our who's who of the film. The director, of course, Sam Raimi, best known from projects like the Evil Dead films, as well as, of course, the original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire. Following that, some of his other projects were Drag Me to Hell. And then prior to this, his last major motion picture that he had done was Oz the Great and Powerful. The writer of this film was Michael Waldron, who had previously worked on an episode, I believe, of Rick and Morty. He's also the showrunner for Loki, or one of the showrunners and writers for Loki. He's also worked on Heels, and he is slated, according to IMDb, as the writer of an upcoming Untitled Star Wars / Kevin Feige project. And he also makes a cameo in the film as Charlie's best man at the wedding at the beginning of the film. Starring, of course, Benedict Cumberbatch as Dr. Stephen Strange, best known from projects like Sherlock Holmes, Star Trek Into Darkness, the Hobbit films where he voiced Smaug, and he has been playing Doctor Strange since Doctor Strange in 2016. Did he also win the Oscar last year for Best Actor? I'm forgetting that. I know he was nominated for one of the Oscars last year for, I think he won. I wanted Andrew Garfield to win, but I think Benedict Cumberbatch ended up winning, right? No, Will Smith ended up winning. Duh.
Will Smith.
Of course.
Will Smith won.
Of course. How could I forget the slap heard around the world and then the award given to the guy right after the fact?
Yep.
So he also lost to Will Smith, and I think he also made that joke about, or he got beat by Will Smith, I think is the joke he made on Saturday Night Live. In addition to Benedict Cumberbatch, we have Elizabeth Olsen back as Wanda Maximoff / the Scarlet Witch, having been previously in projects like Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, Old Boy, the 2014 Godzilla, Ingrid Goes West, and the series Sorry for Your Loss. And she's been playing Wanda Maximoff since the post-credits tease from Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Of course, much more mainstream in Avengers: Age of Ultron. And of course, she had the great run in WandaVision last year. We have Benedict Wong back as Wong, also having been in projects like The Martian and Annihilation, and he's been playing Wong since Doctor Strange back in 2016. Xochitl Gomez playing America Chavez. She's been in a handful of miscellaneous shorts, and then really probably the only other major thing of note prior to Doctor Strange here is she was in the recent Babysitters Club remake, reboot, I don't know. She's been in a handful of episodes of the Babysitters Club. Rachel McAdams playing Dr. Christine Palmer, of course, having been in projects like The Notebook, Mean Girls, also in the other version of Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr., the film Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes, whatever the second one was, as Irene Adler. She's in the film About Time. She was in one of the seasons of True Detective, which is like the season I always forget about. And she's been playing Christine Palmer since the original Doctor Strange film. I broke out a whole little category here of our Illuminati guest stars, cameos, all that stuff. Chiwetel Ejiofor playing Baron Mordo, having been in projects like Love Actually, Serenity, which is probably the first thing I ever remember seeing him in, really. He's also in the film Kinky Boots, 2012, 12 Years a Slave, and he has been playing Mordo since Doctor Strange in 2016. Haley Atwell returns as Captain Carter, having played Peggy Carter since Captain America: The First Avenger in 2011, and then most recently playing Captain Carter in the What If series. And she is slated to be in the upcoming Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2 films, joining that franchise. Anson Mount playing Black Bolt. Is probably best known these days for Star Trek Discovery and now Star Trek Strange New Worlds. But he was also Black Bolt back in the ill-fated Inhumans show in 2017, which feels wild that like was only 2017 when that came out.
Jeez, that's weird.
Yeah. But then also it's like realizing that was 5 years ago. I'm now doing that thing where man, my baseline is just 2020, but yeah, 2017, that actually does not feel right. That feels like that was way older, because that would have been
it feels like it had to have been older, because it was around the same time that, like, what was it, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
It was definitely like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spinoff, and I guess it was probably like 3 or 4 seasons into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Let me see, let me pull up.
I swear I was still watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when the Inhumans was
it's all those episodes were 2017. All right.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, that definitely Okay. Anyway, Lashana Lynch playing this universe's version of Captain Marvel. She's also recently been in projects like No Time to Die, over on the James Bond side of things. And she's been playing Maria Rambeau since Captain Marvel in 2019. And she is slated to be a Miss Honey in an upcoming Netflix version of the film Matilda. So they're basically remaking Matilda, and she's going to be Miss Honey in that, which was completely news to me, but okay. John Krasinski in here as Reed Richards, of course, best known as Jim from The Office, but he's also been playing Jack Ryan in the series of the same name over on Amazon Prime, I believe. And then he's also star and director of the A Quiet Place films. Patrick Stewart in there as Professor Charles Xavier, probably best known to many from Star Trek The Next Generation, and now Picard, as well as, of course, all of the Next Generation related films. He's also been in the American Dad cartoon from the Family Guy team, and he's, of course, been Professor X since X-Men all the way back in the year 2000, being Professor X for 22 years now. Other little cameos or notable cast we have here. We have Jet Klein as Tommy Maximoff and Julian Hilliard as Billy Maximoff, reprising their roles from WandaVision. We have Michael Stuhlbarg as Dr. Nick West, who's been in projects like Boardwalk Empire, A Serious Man, The Shape of Water, and Call Me By Your Name. He was also Dr. Nick in the original Doctor Strange. Charlize Theron makes her debut in the MCU in the post-credit or mid-credits sequence as Clea, of course, known from projects like Monster, Hancock, and Snow White and the Huntsman, Mad Max Fury Road, and she's been in the Fast and Furious series since The Fate of the Furious. Bruce Campbell making his little obligatory Sam Raimi cameo as Pizza Papa, of course, known as Ash from the Evil Dead series. He's also cameoed in all of the Spider-Man films. Is in Sky High, which is definitely another film that's like on the back burner lists to do as a That D Plus show at some point in time. And he played, of course, Sam Axe in the USA series Burn Notice. And that was actually, like, that and Spider-Man were the first things I ever knew him from. But mostly Burn Notice. And then lastly, shout out to Ross Marquand as the voice of Ultron, who, in addition to being a long-running cast member of The Walking Dead, has basically been racking up like roles in the MCU, having replaced Hugo Weaving as Red Skull, starting with Infinity War, and he also replaced James Spader as the voice of Ultron, starting in the What If animated series. And he's also can be heard these days in the Invincible cartoon as well. A little bit of trivia for you. The one-eyed tentacle monster in the film is known in the Marvel Comics as Shumagorath, who's named from a phrase in the Robert E. Howard short story The Curse of the Golden Skull, published in the spring of 1967. However, due to rights issues between Marvel and Howard's estate, film had the monster renamed as Gargantos, after a sea monster in the Marvel Comics. Creature was already also briefly introduced in the Marvel Universe in the episode What If Captain Carter Were the First Avenger. I remember always like everybody being like, "Oh my God, it's Shumagorath," being like, "I don't know what that means, but okay," and then them being like, "Actually, it's not Shumagorath because of legal reasons." This movie was originally meant to be before Spider-Man No Way Home in the production line of things, but of course the COVID-19 pandemic forced the schedules to be altered and readjusted, and this movie ultimately came out after Spider-Man No Way Home. Notably, America Chavez training to be a sorcerer at Camartage at the end of the film was likely setting up for her to fill the role that ultimately gets filled by Ned in Spider-Man No Way Home, where she would have been portaling in the other Spider-Men, either from their home universes, or she would have been the magic master doing the sparkly circles. But instead, that went to Ned, and Ned just is suddenly magic. Danny Elfman opened up about the fight scene between Strange and his Earth 838 variant, saying that quote, notes are flying off the page, literally, while also sharing that, quote, various classical pieces, unquote, were involved initially. Quote, literally, not metaphorically, these notes are flying off the page. It was working various classical pieces against each other, kind of famous pieces. End quote. Spider-Man 2 composer then revealed that Kevin Feige, made a last-minute change to the sequence, with the Marvel boss suggesting to just simplify it to Beethoven versus Bach. Quote, then in the 59th minute of the 11th hour at the very end, Kevin Feige jumped in and said to just simplify it to Beethoven versus Bach. I did one more pass at it where it was Beethoven's Fifth Symphony against Bach's Toccata and Fugue. It really worked out perfectly, end quote. Benedict Cumberbatch also chimed in on the subject, revealing he had came up with the idea of sound effects splitting it apart and coming back together. It was a very novel use of the environment. It was strange, desperately reaching at hand for what there was. It was a lot of fun to do. There was a point where it became a little bit like a weird tennis match. I was like, no, it's got to be more inventive. We have to explode it, and we have to use different elements. I came up with the idea of sound effects splitting it apart and coming back together. This was a terribly written trivia thing that I should have edited first, because so much of it is just like, here's what they said, and then the quote of what they said. Notes were hitting Sinister Strange, like sort of peppering him with bullets, and then there was one note that would go into a ball that's being held to explode. In an interview with Variety, VFX artist Alexis Watsbrut, apologies if I butchered that, commented on some of the many multiverses that appear in the brief sequence with Stephen Strange and America Chavez falling through them. One point, there was a, quote, an Incan statue world, end quote, one that eventually became the Living Tribunal world, thanks to a suggestion from Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige, who also suggested that their jungle concepts be turned into the Savage World, a Marvel Comics location closely tied to both the X-Men and Magneto. Quest led to the VFX team adding dinosaurs. And I'm not going to read the rest of that because that's just all a requote of what I just said. So the same person wrote that trivia point. When Strange meets Reed Richards, he says the Fantastic Four, didn't you chart in the 60s? A group called the Fantastic Four had a number 6 R&B hit in 1967 with, quote, with the song The Whole World is a Stage. This is also a callback to the first Doctor Strange movie where he answered music trivia questions in the operating room. And in the living room of Wanda.
That is a really good one, actually.
Yeah, it was a fun little trivia bit.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like fitting in with the character that had been established here. In the living room of the Wanda 838, the TV shows a cartoon featuring Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald famously was invented by Walt Disney prior to Mickey Mouse, but Universal Pictures took the rights for Oswald, and so Disney created Mickey instead, who of course would soon go on to eclipse Oswald in popularity. And this was a fun little thing that I caught like when watching it the first time, was that Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was in there. So the implication here is that like Oswald, not Mickey, blew up in the 838 universe and became probably, you probably have Oswald land and stuff like that. One last one I didn't put in there because I just saw it like as an Instagram post today was apparently the technology that Mr. Fantastic uses to teleport into the Illuminati room is allegedly a Doctor Doom reference, as per like the writer of the film. It's basically like Doctor Doom's technology. So the theory the implication of that being that like Mr. Fantastic is already defeated and basically like acquired Doom technology. I had also seen a conflicting Easter eggy thing suggesting that it was technology similar to the technology that the TVA uses in Loki, which would also
that's what I thought it was
factor in because Kang is like a descendant of Richard Reed, right? So yeah, who knows? But a couple little fun facts just surrounding Mr. Fantastic there. Reed Richards, not Richard Reed.
I didn't want to correct you. We were already past that.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not I've actually not seen like the Fantastic Four movies, so it's one of my little comic book. I know they're not good.
I will say the first two are very much of their time superhero movies,
Mhm.
which is to say they just aren't really good. They're just they focus on all the wrong things about the superhero genre
Hmm.
that Marvel gets right now. Well, it was like people forget it wasn't a firm science back then.
Mhm.
And so no, like it was like they were cool. They like the visual effects were rad as hell back then.
Sure.
And Chris Evans as Johnny Storm was like a match made in heaven for that. So
Mhm. I remember,
it
like, from what I have seen of it, like, actually, I maybe have watched it, like, once or something like that, but, like, I remember at the time, I would have had a huge crush on Jessica Alba, so, like, her Sue Storm would have been like a, "Oh, that's neat." But
weirdly enough, I've never understood the appeal of Jessica Alba.
I was a big Dark Angel fan back in the day. I have
See, that's the thing. I like I liked watching Dark Angel. I just wasn't that big into like her as like an icon, or like I was like I like Dark Angel. It was cool.
yeah. I have the 2-season DVD set, behind me on one of my shelves. Um so that's yeah, that's it for the trivia. So Cam, we've already talked about this at length, a
Yeah.
month and a half ago. But what did you think of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness?
So I rewatched it just a couple days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what? I'm like like it's on this week. I didn't know if it was going to be on the show this week or not.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like ended up getting home, had enough time to eat dinner, get ready for stuff, and then like okay, yeah, I can record a podcast with you. The siren's call went out and I answered as always.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, so I had an opportunity to rewatch it, and I found it very like I found that I liked other things about it that I didn't really pick up on before. I didn't notice before. But I have to say the thing that I like most of all is this is at its core a monster.
Mm-hmm.
It is at its core a horror monster movie. And one of the things I love is that in order to deal with the monster that Wanda becomes, Doctor Strange also has to become a monster.
Mm-hmm.
And he does so. And I have to say, like, I don't know who could have done this script and done a better job of the effect, the direction of the effects and everything that Sam Raimi does.
Mm-hmm.
Because his background in the Army of Darkness, Evil Dead saga of films and Ash vs. the Evil Dead makes him perfect for Zombie Strange, where it's horrifying and scary, but like not scary, but horrifying and grotesque, but at the same time, like in some weird way, a little slapsticky and lighthearted. He does such an amazing job of towing the line of like truly frightening stuff and it being kind of zany, because it's like it kind of plays into the reality of, man, it wouldn't it be just like actually super weird if corpses were walking around?
Mm-hmm.
Like they wouldn't look like people that you would recognize because they'd be bloated and like messed up, or like, having parts of the jaw. Like he does such an amazing job of making like zombies and other stuff are usually, they try to make them as believable and real as possible with it, but ignoring the fact that if you have ever been to a funeral with an open casket and you see the person lying there, they don't really look like them. Like there's so much that's changed there's so much about the body that changes after death, whether it's like they drain the blood, they like all the stuff that they do with the corpse, and it doesn't look like the person you knew, really. Like they do their best, and like heaven bless the like morticians out there who do an amazing job of like bringing and recreating as much as possible life at a dead body.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not easy. I went to like community college at MCC for before I dropped out because I was a loser. It's fine. I graduated college eventually. But when I was going to school, I was friends with a guy who was in mortuary science, and he would spend so much time like practicing with like some like clay,
Mm-hmm.
or like some modeling clay in his hand. He was always had modeling clay in his hand. And eventually, like, I asked him about it. I was like, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm making ears. And I said, what do you mean you're making ears? She goes, ears. He goes, ears are one of the most distinct parts of a person. Like your ear shape is like there's so many different variations that could happen with your ear shape, and also like the angle of your ear off of your head. Like there's so many things that like he goes, as a mortician, you have to be able to, like, if they were in an accident or something, like you need to recreate the ear. And so I think that was one of those moments where I was like, oh wow, yeah, corpses aren't like they're the distinct difference between a corpse and a living person is significant.
Yeah.
And after seeing, and unfortunately, and sadly, after knowing so many people that have passed in my 32 years of living on this planet, like, yeah, it is like, it is a little jarring. And I never really put donuts to dollars on it before realizing it's just because it's like there is something very distinct about it. And so him playing into the kind of like zaniness that is the reality of a corpse, I think just does super well. And also he's just like really, really good at that campy horror. And so like I found myself finding the little Sam Raimi-isms throughout the entire film and just really enjoying it, man. Like it is a film that I don't think is like the standout, like blockbuster, gangbuster, like killer movie from the MCU. But I didn't think like the original Doctor Strange was either.
Yeah.
And so I think that it just, my love of the original Doctor Strange is how psychedelic they pull from the psychedelic style of the 70s to give us some really cool realms and possibilities. And there is a lesser form of creativity on that end of things. I'm just reiterating my points from a really long podcast.
Yeah.
But I found that there was it wasn't a trade-off so much as the Raimi's strength with this film was not the elements of a fantastical realities that you got to skip through like a lot of us were expecting from the Multiverse of Madness, and instead playing with the kind of madness that exists in a multiverse, which is Wanda going through and like do this idea of dream walking and going to see other lives, and the idea that like when you like you are living another version of your own life when you are in your dreams and in a different multiverse. And by the way, if you die in your dreams, there's a good chance that that was you dying in that multiverse. Like they play with it so well, and has there are so many. I really want to give a massive shout out to just the lines, like the lines of dialogue that are just like snippy, snappy, that remind you it's like, oh, that's right, I forgot. Doctor Strange just isn't like the cool used to be a doctor, now he's a wizard. He has always been he's always been an ass.
Yeah.
He's been an ass, and he knows that he's an asshole. But at the same time, he's a good dude. He just happens to also be a dick.
He's arrogant. He is driven by arrogance.
Very much so.
Yeah. I to the Sam Raimi-ness of it all, I want to pull this other bit of trivia in that I had kind of held back on. According to the screenwriter Michael Waldron, Sam Raimi was originally hesitant to use zombie Defender Strange in the film. Michael Waldron shared, quote, "I was totally writing with Sam in mind the entire time. I had watched all his movies. I tried to really get an ear for the dialogue in his movies because I wanted it to feel like a Sam Raimi film. But Sam, to his credit, had no interest in coming in and just playing the hits. Sam did not come in and say, I need you to give me a zombie. And in fact, when I presented the idea of Dead Strange to him, there was a real hesitancy on his part because he didn't want to seem like he was just saying, I want to do my Sam Raimi thing." So, like, I remember definitely when we originally talked about the film, it was like we thought all of those ideas were probably thrown into the pot from Sam Raimi, but it sounds like Michael Waldron was more bringing those ideas to the table because of Sam Raimi's strength with them, and
that's cool.
Ultimately, Sam Raimi, did drive those ideas forward. But like it sounds like the idea was much more from the writer's perspective than it was like the writer did the homework to be like, how do I make this feel like Sam Raimi's work? So that was a cool little bit of additional trivia there that I saw that related to kind of what you were identifying there.
That's cool. That's so cool. I love that. I love that first off, I love that he went back and watched Sam Raimi's movies, because an underrated thing that in Sam Raimi's movies is the dialogue is snippy and snappy, and it's good. they're one of the best scenes in this movie. It is probably the best scene in this movie that I'm referring to, but it's one of the best scenes in the entire trilogy. Is the pie shop scene in Spider-Man 3, where Harry tells Peter that the person MJ left Peter for was him, and the heartbreak and the terribleness, and it's like, yeah. But then when Peter gets up and leaves, like just totally upset at Harry, the waitress comes over and she goes, "So how was it?" And he just takes a big old bite and goes, "So good." And he's not he's talking about the pie and his revenge.
Yeah.
And like a underappreciated scene that is very Sam Raimi. It's campy, but it's a little bit of a double entendre there with like meaning two things at once. But it is just so good and serves the plot, and also serves as being like a sly line that gets thrown in there. And there's plenty of them this week. Freaking love it.
Yeah.
Freaking love it.
I definitely like recognize that scene from the meme that it has since become of James Franco eating that pie. Yeah, it's like, as somebody who doesn't, and we talked about this a lot in our spoiler cast, I'm not like the biggest Sam Raimi fan. Like I like the Spider-Man movies fine, especially for like their time and their era, but I don't like what is it? I like Spider-Man and no. I always forget. I think I like Spider-Man in those. I like Peter Parker in the Amazing Spider-Man ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the Tom Holland is like a better blending of both worlds.
Agreed.
Like Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker just always feels weird to me. But like when he's in the suit, it's fun and fine. But it is also still like stilted a lot.
Wait, you mean
I don't like Tobey Maguire being Peter Parker. Like when he's
totally opposite. Oh my gosh, totally opposite.
Okay. Yeah.
Flip that around. Sorry. I've always attested that Tobey Maguire's the best Peter Parker, but he's not mean enough and bully enough in the suit.
Okay.
And I found that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker sucked. Because he was A, too hot, and B, too cool.
Sure. Again,
I
think you have a very strange idea of the skater boy being the cool kid at school. And it's realizing that my long-standing kind of belief is I like the plots and the movies of the Raimi Spider-Man more, but I don't like Tobey Maguire as Peter / Spider-Man. I like Andrew Garfield as Peter and Spider-Man, but I don't like the plots of his movies. And then that's
because the plots of his movies suck.
Yeah. And then Tom Holland gets like the best of both worlds, and just elevates them both. And then of course, like No Way Home did a lot to like remedy all of my issues with like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's stuff, and just gives them like nice bits of closure in that. But we're not talking about that one. So yeah, like just Sam Raimi, like as a typically non-horror fan, he's not really my particular taste, and a lot of those elements of this kind of like fall in that same category. Like when I had that moment of realization in the Illuminati stuff of like, oh, all of these characters are just being introduced to be fodder for Wanda, I was like, okay, well now I can just like sit back and enjoy the ludicrousness of what I'm about to see. But then there are also just like weird moments where it's like, that's just a jump scare out of nowhere just for the sake of having a jump scare that isn't supported by anything really, like at all. In particular, I'm thinking of the one where they're like running through the like underground tunnels or whatever, and like the door closes. She's just been like plowing through them, no problem. But then suddenly this one, she doesn't plow through, and then suddenly she just pops up out of nowhere for the sake of a jump scare. So like those horror elements of the film, I don't really like. But I think like Benedict Cumberbatch is giving a fun performance. I think Xochitl Gomez gives a fun performance in her debut here as America Chavez, and I think it is, as much as I don't, we talked about this a lot too. Like, I don't necessarily like how they take the character from WandaVision that like did have a lot of growth and like seemingly good forward momentum. And they kind of like reset the clock on her a little bit and just make
Yeah.
her kind of like bereft and distraught, and so she just goes completely off the rails and ends up going on a killing spree for her fictional kids, rather than trying to just find a universe where maybe she died but the kids are there and she can just kind of step in there. So I don't necessarily like what Wanda does in this movie, but I think Elizabeth Olsen's performance as Wanda is still as compelling as it always has been, and I think she's still, top of her game in terms of like she showed up to play.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda, it is like part of it is like I do think that there was a lot of catharsis at the end of WandaVision that gave us a feeling that there had been growth and that she wouldn't do something like this. But at the same time, there is and I think it comes to the percolation and exposure of the show coming out and people taking away, like walking away from it with with a perspective that was not necessarily the same perspective as people working. This is kind of the problem, like a bit of a problem that we saw with the Star Wars, like the sequel trilogy, is they filmed these things concurrently, and so a lot of things that were actually people like picked up on and really enjoyed in the like after the movie had come out. Well, the other movie is already almost finished, and I feel like that was probably something similar to this, in which we had a like the feelings that people had and the emphasis that they felt was put on in the editing and in the kind of like in the post WandaVision like reality that we had, the post WandaVision kind of like reality that we were living in, which was, well, how do we conclude her journey? Like, how do we feel her journey went? And rather than it being that way, we talked about it in our spoiler cast, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because we really went in on this point in our spoiler cast. Where we really kind of tore this plot point apart, and like not in the way of like we hated it, we tore it apart because we were angry, but like we really took it apart and looked through it piece by piece and kind of examined it in several different ways. And I think my interpretation of it this time around was they had there was a different thought process on the conclusion to WandaVision than that. It wasn't entirely different than what people walked away with and took away from the show. But I think on like from a script perspective, from a writing perspective, from like where things are at, there is a bit of a disconnect, and I think that that's very real and that's very valid for people to be saying that, because I think it's true. But it's not outside of the scope. If you look at it kind of on a flat surface, if you look at it on kind of like without looking at how performances and editing and everything that goes into a production can change people's feelings about stuff from a script perspective, from a story perspective, in the like on paper timeline that they're working on, when they now pump out the script for Multiverse of Madness, and there's delays and there's problems getting the film out so soon after WandaVision, and it ends up getting kind of tumbled through stuff. You talked about it towards the beginning of the podcast, about how things kind of got mixed, like worked around. And
there's a couple other additional trivia elements that are, according to IMDb, related to this. One is Elizabeth Olsen flew to London to work on this film just 2 days after she finished filming WandaVision. She was. They were working very hot off the heels of WandaVision, and maybe hadn't completely figured out what the ultimate like transition out of that show was going to look like. And then related, Sam Raimi has observed that due to the chaotic production process, he and the screenwriters essentially figured out the movie during filming, with the ending being conceptualized about halfway through the shoot. So like even that, like, the different shades of Wanda and how much of a villain she
Mhm.
was throughout this movie was seemingly kind of being like tweaked and adjusted in the midst of filming. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a Sam Raimi didn't necessarily have here's everything that happened in WandaVision
Mhm.
going into this to really like build off of and work from. And yeah, I think her arc in particular suffers a little bit from that, but yeah, she is the monster for a Sam Raimi monster movie. So she is one of the monsters in a Sam
Yeah.
Raimi monster movie. So
And
yeah.
that's the thing. I feel like the idea of Wanda, like, and so once again, I feel like that's totally valid. But I don't like it when people like basically dismiss it as like, oh, Sam Raimi didn't care about Wanda, he just wanted a monster. I think that like there's been a lot of the criticism of it, I think, has been elevated to a point where people we're looking at it from the way that like we experienced it as an audience, which was we had WandaVision, we had a lot of time for WandaVision to percolate, for us to sit with it, sit in it, theorize, feel emotionally what they were conveying through the editing. That once again was not of like we know like Wanda, like Elizabeth Olsen started filming 2 days after they wrapped WandaVision, like on a plot by point, or sorry, plot by plot point, no, plot point by plot point. There we go. Plot point by plot point. Like look at it. There is not that big of a leap for her character, but in the like with how people felt about her walking away from the plot of land that Vision had bought for them, the like a lot of the emotions that people felt about the quote unquote closure that she got, um, like there's a flip to that. There's a side of that that I think is like if they had that time to really understand how people were feeling and the emotions people had away from WandaVision, how much could have changed about what
Yeah.
would have changed about that. And I think that that's a very interesting thought, that like we'll never know.
Yeah.
But I also think that that is like it speaks to we are getting a lot of these movies, and a lot of these movies and TV shows and everything are not getting the opportunity to sit in. And I think this is also where a lot of, I think, and I finally realized, I'm like, this is also ties in directly to how people feel about Marvel shows. And they're like, well, it should have been a movie. Oh, this movie should have been a show. A lot of the, like, those feelings, those things that happen are after we absorb them and then kind of like digest them and think about them in a longer process where we're like, I think it could have worked better this way. But that's in the post. Like they don't know where, like when they started working on Moon Knight, they didn't know what Miss Marvel was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
When they, and like that shows throughout the entire thing. And so I feel that there is like when we are doing these from now on, I am going to try to look at it from where are they in product, like what, like, because this is more than just the movie. This is everything that went into it. And at the end of the day, we can only really judge the movie based off of its own merits.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we both really enjoyed the film. We felt that, yeah, Wanda kind of got like jilted a bit in that, but she still kicked ass. I love another thing. I loved her as the monster,
Mm-hmm.
because she was so damn good at it and so damn scary. Elizabeth Olsen absolutely kills it as the monster in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
She just, when she comes out broken from the reflection dimension that she sifted through, and she like her bone, like everything tweaks back into place, and it's like so damn good. And it's like, man, and she's so good at like, I'm justified in what I'm doing. I'm a mother.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I do want to highlight, and we brought up this and specified this distinction in the spoiler cast too, but the end of WandaVision isn't her like walking away from the plot with closure. It's the like the mid credits or post credits tease of like her out in the woods reading the Darkhold. But the thing is, in that scene, we hear the kids like calling out for help.
Yeah.
Which isn't really supported by what we see in this film. Like we're not
100%.
like this film isn't, the kids are doing fine in the universe that Wanda insists on like going to. They have their own Wanda in that universe. So
Mhm.
like the fact that she's so like weirdly insistent upon trying to save them from herself ends up turning it into more of the like the weird little kingpin dilemma from Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse of like, okay, but if you take your wife and son from another universe's kingpin, that kingpin's just going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
Um
100%. Like,
so
yeah.
it's
I
just
yeah.
a weird like it like again, performances all around great. It's just such a like an unforced error in terms of like a plot point around Wanda. I think you could have still done all of the stuff of making her the monster, just tweak a little bit of stuff here and there script wise to make it make sense, or make it that like maybe
When
or that somebody's like manipulating her to think that the kids are sick or unsafe or something.
let's take a moment though. So those voices are like, when did those voices get added? Was it in the script that the kids say help in the like? Is the direction and the script saying she is looking at her kids through the dark hole, and then in post
I
edit
mean,
they add,
sure,
yeah,
you're bringing up the yeah, that
yeah,
production degree perspective, but like they've had a year and a half to account for the fact that they did have the kids calling out for help. And so the fact that they just don't like adjust or do reshoots or whatever to accommodate that plot point that they've set up is odd. Or and it doesn't even necessarily like, it could just be that those kids screaming are the Darkhold like manipulating and twisting her, but the movie doesn't do a good enough job to convey maybe that that's what's happening to her or something. They give like this, the blanket like the Darkhold corrupts everybody it touches. It's like, okay, sure, but then they undermine that by like it corrupting Doctor Strange at the end too by giving him his weird third eye thing. So it's like there's just weird like little inconsistencies in it. Again, doesn't like
yeah.
break anything. It is just like that's the one plot element that like I'm like that's what weakens some of the character like emotional connection for me in a way that I wish it didn't, or I wish it hadn't done. But yeah, again, like
Yeah.
overall still good performances. And despite my aversion to the horror stuff, I think it does a fun job of playing with like, well, it does a fun job of playing with all the tropes, and it gives us yet another instance of like the man kind of bringing in the cub in Doctor Strange and America Chavez, as we've seen in like Mandalorian and Obi-Wan Kenobi recently, and like all of these other things. But I think like even that the end of America's arc in this film being like you've had the power within you all along is like a tropey thing, but the fact that it's being conveyed through Doctor Strange possessing a zombie Doctor Strange from another universe is a fun little twist on it in its own right. So any other highlights or favorite moments or anything you want to give a shout out to before we dive into some grading, Cam?
Nope, I think we're good to go.
All right.
If you want any more from us, listen to the other
Yeah.
podcast.
I was gonna say, yeah, this
I was gonna say I can literally never talk about this movie ever again, and I'll be fine.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a shorter one because we have already spent an hour and a half or 2 hours on it over on That Nerdy Site Show, but still a fun little conversation to circle back around to in terms of all the like D+isms that we have and can do. I mean, I guess the last thing I want to give a shout out to specifically in this podcast is, while I did miss a lot of the like cool production design elements of the first Doctor Strange in this one, because like we get glimpses of those multiverse worlds, but the 2/3 multiverses we really like spend time in, one is the one we already know, and then the other two are basically like, here's a slightly different, more botanical version of the world where they go on red instead of green, and then like the incursion world where it's like that's cool visually, but like we don't spend enough time there, or the time that we are spending there is mostly just in dark, dreary Sanctum Sanctorum, so we don't get like all of the cool like mirror dimension elements that the first one really gave us. So like I missed those, but in terms of like the highlights of this, I will say that like um the musical note fight, I am coming more around on as I've seen it a couple more times now. In particular, I did not realize at the time when we
That it
first
was
were talking
Beethoven
about it.
versus Bach.
I didn't realize. Like I knew like the iconic like chords and elements and like I knew those things, but I wouldn't have been able to isolate and say, oh, that was Beethoven number 5 and this was Bach fugue and or toccata and fugue or whatever they
Like
are.
I'm not well versed enough in classical music to have picked up on that initially.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt like at like because I've seen this movie 3 times now. Um, I have felt like the Beethoven versus Bach thing was conveyed a lot better the second and third time that I watched it. The first time I was still like kind of just like overwhelmed by everything going.
Mm-hmm.
I was so absorbed by the fight that was happening on screen. I wasn't listening to the fight that was happening in music.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is like I'm like, oh, they're songs. They're throwing a song at each other, and it's like 2 different songs, and that's what I kind of picked up on it. Until this podcast, I never could have told you that one was Beethoven, one was Bach. I just imagined it was 2 different classical songs.
Yeah. And that like the Bach in particular, the toccata and fugue is such like an iconic like horror theme. So like I remember like really enjoying that on a first viewing, but yeah, the just added elements of, you know, arguably as somebody that worked at a symphony, you know, albeit briefly and with very little actual productions going on during my
I was about to
tenure there.
say, yeah, I was also about to say, like
yeah.
you also worked in an office. It's not like you were out there.
Yeah. But like,
Yeah.
still, like, you know, I was in their system, you know, putting in performances and stuff, and they had just wrapped up a full season like celebrating Beethoven and stuff, and so like I know enough about, you know, symphonic orchestras and stuff to know that like Beethoven and Bach are pretty much the 2 biggest names. So like there is like just this fun little like appreciation of that being the fight, and also like this idea that the idea that like it was originally a much bigger, broader, and probably like incorporating lots of other songs and stuff into it, and then Kevin Feige basically being like, let's strip it down and just make it Beethoven versus Bach, and Danny Elfman jumping on that and being like, all right, that works, and I think it is wildly silly and campy, but it is like one of the most visually interesting elements of the film, especially in a, you know, in a world where they can do so much with magic. That is a fun thing. Oh, that reminds me of one other trivia thing that I talked about in the spoiler cast that I did not remember to mention here. But the lantern that Christine like burns the demon spirits with or whatever, is a callback to an item in the first Doctor Strange movie that Doctor Strange originally like threatens Caecilius with, before Caecilius is like, you don't know what to do with that, do you? You don't know how to use that. And Doctor Strange, of course, does not yet. So it was fun seeing like that item getting its own little callback and seeing its power and stuff. But yeah, trying to think if there's any other last little bits I want to give some love to. What did you think, I guess, of the Illuminati casting, Cam? Like,
It was pretty perfect.
Are you going to be mad if John Krasinski doesn't end up being Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four movie?
No. If it was just a cool cameo, awesome. If it's going to be something for something later on, why not? I'm down with it all. It could be cool either way. Yeah. I'm just putting it out there. Also, if you want to make Rahul Cooley the
Mr. Fantastic,
Mr. Fantastic, I'd be cool with that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like realizing that this is like the first time both the members of the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a fascinating little element. Obviously, like WandaVision had the like fake out tease of crossing over between the Quicksilvers. But I think like bringing in Professor X in this one is like, oh, cool. So X-Men do exist in some kind of form of the multiverse. Now I'll be very curious to see how they get folded in or introduced into like the MCU proper, moving forward, and just seeing, are they going to first class it again, or what are they going to do with that? And then same with Fantastic Four. It'll be interesting to see how they like do something with that. And it'll be also interesting to see if like, the idea of like Chris Evans ever coming back as the Human Torch, or Michael B. Jordan coming back as the Human Torch, from their respective universes, given that both of them have been prominent figures elsewhere in the MCU. Yeah, I thought it was a fun, easy way to, give some fan servicey love to those factions and say, hey, yep, we can play with them now. We did that whole Fox merger thing, so they belong to us again. And if they end up just being as one-offs, at least we got them as fun little one-offs here. And whether or not they continue on, I could really care less either way. I'll be much more interested in just how good their respective movies and stuff are. So yeah. Let's go ahead and dive into the report card then, where we grade from A+ to F. What do you want to give Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness as a grade here, Cameron?
I will give it a B+.
B+? Yeah.
Yep. I think it's a solid film, but it doesn't really break into the A rank form.
Yeah. Probably a little cooler. Probably a B-, I think, is probably where I sit on this. And certainly there is like elements of like, in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm grading on some kind of Marvel scale or whatever. And it's, it's probably a mid-level Marvel film for me. But it has some fun moments, has some fun highlights. I think there are elements that it's also like, if we'd seen this movie first compared to other things, there might have been fun, like the Gargantos fight at the beginning. If we hadn't just seen, the climactic battle of the Suicide Squad with Harley Quinn stabbing Starro's eye out, then maybe the climactic moment of Gargantos's fight with Doctor Strange would have been interesting. I think there's another element of the way Doctor Strange uses magic in this one, of like pulling in, demon hands or dog heads or whatever from other dimensions, is like, it's an interesting evolution of the magic for the character, but it like we haven't really seen anything to set that up in terms of that's things he can do. It's just like it's just a given in this, so it's like, okay, I guess, sure, why not. But yeah, I say probably B- for me. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. You have Miss Marvel, you can currently watch on a weekly basis over there on Disney+. The original Doctor Strange, WandaVision, Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, Thor Ragnarok, What If, and Marvel Studio Legends. Extracurriculars, you watch anything else on Disney+ these days, Cam?
Nah, just Miss Marvel.
Just Miss Marvel? Keeping up with that then?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
Yep.
It's been great.
Yep. Agreed. I almost went to bed early Tuesday night, and then I was like, oh shit, Miss Marvel's gonna go live tonight. I'll stay up and watch that, I guess. So yeah, watch that. And then, as I said earlier, I've been watching, or like I was doing laundry last night, and basically like while I was folding laundry and stuff, I threw on the little Baymax shorts, little 6 episodes. I want to say like 10-12 minutes a piece kind of thing. They're just fun little continuations of character, but they're also like the most exciting element of them, and one of the reasons I probably want to touch on them, if you've seen like Making the Rounds, like one of the episodes is like Baymax helping a girl through her first period, and like Baymax goes and gets like tampons and pads or whatever for her while she's in the bathroom, and like as he's in the feminine hygiene aisle, like women start kind of giving him suggestions, and then there's a trans person wearing a trans trans shirt, basically like providing their input as well, and it's like, that's just like really cool that like Disney like did these kinds of things. And another one of the shorts, features like a homosexual romance between a couple of the characters and stuff. And so it's like very cool that like Disney's playing around with these ideas that are inevitably going to piss off the Republicans who are already pissed
Who cares?
at Disney right now. But yeah, like fuck them.
I'm blown away by that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is so cool.
Yeah,
holy crap.
Definitely check out the Baymax short. And so yeah,
I gotta check out those Baymax shorts, man. Those sound rad as hell.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Fun little things. So yeah, go check out Baymax on Disney Plus now. And yeah, maybe we'll do a dedicated episode of that here in a couple weeks' time. But yeah, that is gonna do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to talk about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
I sure do. I want to give a massive shout out to Friday Night Dying Light. Talking about horror, let's talk about how I've been playing this game for a long ass time. By the time you're listening to this or watching this, you'll also be geared up, ready to go, because this comes out Friday. So tonight, if you're watching it the night that it comes out, otherwise, go back and check it out. New episode of Friday Night Dying Light that I'm going to literally be uploading and sending over to Trevor after we record.
Excellent. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. A couple things I'm going to plug. One, that Bond show is all wrapped up now. We had our finale episode go live last weekend, so go check out that show if you want any kind of last lingering thoughts on mine and Logan's thoughts on James Bond. I will also shout out the Castle Vault podcast I guested on this past week, where I joined my friends Josh and Jason over at the Castle Vault to talk about a Goofy movie. For those that don't know, the Castle Vault is a similarly Disney Plus themed podcast where they basically have done seasons of the Castle Vault, where the first season was going through all of the Disney animated films, kind of chronologically and ranking and reviewing them. Then they did Pixar, then they did the MCU, and now they are in season 4, which is the Disney Toons version of animated, which is a lot of like the, not the big budget Walt Disney animation. It is your Goofy movies, or a lot of the like sequels or direct to DVD sequels and stuff like that, like the Aladdin sequels and the Lion King sequels and stuff like that. So I was able to sneak in with them pretty quickly on a Goofy movie, and we just had a great time chatting about that. One of my favorite podcasts that I've gotten to do in a little while, in part because I just get to show up and do the podcast on that one. I don't have to also like run and organize and do everything else like we do here on That Nerdy Site. So go check that out. And then the last thing I want to plug, next week, I think for the most part, will still be a normal week, but I will be in Disneyland. So we won't have a That Nerdy Site show next week because I will not be around to produce that. But there are still going to be some Let's Plays. And in particular, I did some Disney themed Let's Plays. So there's going to be a Lego Indiana Jones Let's Play next week, as well as an Epic Mickey 2 Let's Play. Thanks to the PlayStation Plus Premium subscription where I could stream those games now. So yeah, go check out all of that fun stuff. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.